Have you ever looked at your bank account at 50 and thought, it's too late for me? Well, let me tell you about Samuel. At 94 years old, sitting in his modest apartment in Brooklyn, surrounded by grandchildren who visit every Shabbat, he's worth over $3 million. But here's the part that will shake you. At 50, Samuel had exactly $700 to his name, no retirement savings, and he was working as a janitor in a downtown office building. Most people think wealth is built in your 20s and 30s, that if you haven't made it by 40, you've missed your window. Samuel proves that's a lie. And the principles that transformed his life weren't complicated investment strategies or lucky breaks. They were ancient Jewish wisdom, passed down through generations. Wisdom that 23% of Jewish households earning over $200,000 still use today. What Samuel learned at 50 changed everything. And before we go further, understand this. These aren't secrets reserved for a select few. These are principles anyone can apply, regardless of where they're starting. Because Samuel started with less than most people spend on groceries in a week. The first wealth secret Samuel discovered was this: poverty is not a virtue, it's a problem to solve. In Jewish teaching, there's a concept that might surprise you. Being poor isn't seen as noble or spiritual. It's seen as a condition that prevents you from fulfilling your purpose, from helping your community, from supporting your family the way they deserve. When Samuel was 50, he sat in a synagogue one Saturday morning, listening to the rabbi discuss a passage from the Talmud. The rabbi said something that hit him like lightning. A person who doesn't teach their children to earn a living teaches them to steal. Samuel realized he'd been stealing from his own future, from his family's security, by accepting poverty as his fate. That very week, Samuel started his transformation. But he didn't start with big moves. He started with something the Jewish tradition calls the 5-jar method. This ancient system divides every dollar you earn into 5 purposes: giving, investing, saving, spending, and community. Most people think you need a fortune to start investing or giving. Samuel proved you don't. With his $700, Samuel opened 5 envelopes. He labeled them clearly. 10% went to charity immediately, even though he could barely afford his rent. This is the second wealth secret. Giving opens the door for receiving. In Hebrew, there's a word, tzedakah, which means both charity and justice. It's not just about being kind, it's about creating a flow of abundance that returns to you. Samuel put $70 in that charity envelope. His hands shook doing it. That was 2 days of groceries. But he'd watched his parents do this every Friday night, no matter how little they had. And he remembered something his father once said: God doesn't need your money, but you need the character that giving builds. The third jar was for investing, 20%, which meant $140. Samuel didn't know anything about stocks or real estate at 50. But he knew one thing from Jewish wisdom: your money should work while you sleep. So he walked into a community bank that Monday and opened his first investment account. The banker looked at his $140 and almost laughed. Samuel looked him in the eye and said, "This is the beginning, not the end." The third wealth secret Samuel embraced was education never stops. Jewish culture has valued learning above almost everything else for thousands of years. It's why Jewish children often outperform their peers academically. It's not genetics, it's culture. It's families that ask, "What did you learn today?" instead of "How was your day?" at the dinner table. At 50 years old, Samuel started reading. Every morning before his janitor shift began at 6, he was in the public library at 5. He read about compound interest, about real estate, about small business principles. He read biographies of successful people. He studied the Talmud's teachings on commerce and ethics. He became a student again, and education became his greatest investment. Here's what Samuel discovered in those library sessions. Jewish wisdom teaches that there are 3 types of wealth. There's money, there's knowledge, and there's relationships. Most people chase only the first, but the wealthy understand that the second and third create the first. This brings us to the fourth wealth secret. Your network is your net worth. In Jewish communities, there's something called a kehillah, a tight-knit community that supports each other. This isn't about using people. It's about genuine relationships where everyone rises together. Samuel started attending community events, not to ask for anything, but to offer value. He helped elderly members with repairs in their homes for free on weekends. He shared what he was learning about money with young couples just starting out. He became known as someone who gave without expecting anything back. Then something remarkable happened. A man Samuel had helped repair a fence mentioned he was selling a small apartment building. He was tired of being a landlord. He offered Samuel a partnership. If Samuel would manage the building, handle repairs, and deal with tenants, they'd split the profits 50-50. Samuel would need to invest nothing up front. Samuel was 52 by then. He said yes. This was the fifth wealth secret in action. Start with what you have, where you are. You don't need everything figured out. You don't need perfect conditions. Jewish wisdom teaches us to be like Abraham, who was told to go forth without knowing exactly where he was going. The movement itself creates the path. Managing that building was hard. Samuel still worked his janitor job during the day. At night and on weekends, he fixed leaking pipes, collected rent, mediated disputes between tenants. There were months he got only 4 hours of sleep. His wife Ruth would wake at 4 in the morning to find him studying property management books at the kitchen table. But here's what kept Samuel going. The sixth wealth secret. Delayed gratification is the price of lasting wealth. In Jewish tradition, there's a concept called savlanut, patience. The ability to plant a tree today that you might not sit under for 20 years. Most people want instant results. They see someone wealthy and think it happened overnight. It never does. By 55, Samuel had saved enough from his share of the building profits to make a down payment on a small property of his own. Nothing fancy, a duplex in a neighborhood that wasn't trendy. He rented both units and lived with Ruth in a studio apartment. They downsized their life to upsize their future. People thought they were crazy. Samuel's brother asked him why he was living like a pauper at 55. Samuel's response was pure Jewish wisdom. I'm not living like a pauper. I'm living like someone who knows the difference between looking rich and being rich. This is crucial. Jewish teaching warns against gava, excessive pride or showing off. In the Talmud, there are stories of wealthy rabbis who wore simple clothes and lived modestly, not because they had to, but because they understood that real wealth is what you keep, not what you display. Samuel kept his janitor job until he was 60. By then, he owned 3 small properties. The rental income matched his salary. But he didn't quit immediately. He saved every penny of that rental income for another 2 years. Why? Because the 7th and most powerful wealth secret is this. Financial freedom means having options, not just money. When Samuel finally retired from janitorial work at 62, he had 5 properties generating steady income. He'd never made a 6-figure salary in his life. He'd never hit a lottery or received an inheritance. He'd simply applied ancient principles with modern discipline. But here's where Samuel's story gets even more interesting. From 62 to 70, he didn't stop. Jewish wisdom teaches that work isn't a curse, it's a blessing. The Hebrew word for work, avodah, is the same word used for worship. Work gives life meaning. So Samuel kept acquiring properties, kept learning, kept growing. By 70, his net worth crossed $1 million. By 80, it was $2 million. Now at 94, it's over $3 million. And he still wakes up every morning with purpose. He studies Talmud. He mentors young people in his community about money. He supports causes he believes in. He's living proof that wealth building after 50 isn't just possible, it's sometimes more successful because you bring wisdom, patience, and perspective that younger people lack. Let's break down exactly how Samuel applied each wealth secret practically, because knowing principles means nothing if you can't apply them. The first secret, rejecting poverty as acceptable, meant Samuel had to change his mindset. Every morning, he would say a prayer, but he added something personal. He'd say, "Thank you for what I have, and show me how to create more so I can give more and serve more." This wasn't greed, this was purpose. He reframed wealth from selfish to service-oriented. The second secret, giving first, was practiced ruthlessly. Even when his properties had expensive repairs, even when tenants didn't pay rent on time, Samuel never touched his charity jar. 10% always went out first. And something mysterious happened. He'd tell you that opportunities appeared when he needed them most. A repair quote would come in lower than expected. A new tenant would appear the same day another left. Call it divine providence or the law of reciprocity, but Samuel never suffered for his generosity. The third secret, continuous education, became Samuel's competitive advantage. While other landlords hired property managers, Samuel learned to do everything himself. He took free community college courses on basic accounting. He learned tenant law from library books. He studied negotiation from YouTube videos once he finally got a computer at 70. Every skill he learned saved money or made money. The fourth secret, building genuine relationships, paid dividends Samuel never imagined. The man who gave him that first partnership opportunity. They stayed friends for 30 years. When Samuel was 68 and wanted to sell one property to buy two smaller ones, that friend connected him with a buyer who paid cash and closed in 2 weeks. Relationships built on giving turned into business advantages he couldn't have bought. The fifth secret, starting where you are, is perhaps the most important for anyone listening who thinks it's too late. Samuel was 50 with $700. Maybe you're 55 with $5,000. Or 60 with nothing but a pension. The question isn't where you are, it's where you're going. Samuel's favorite teaching from the Talmud was this: you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. You might not build $3 million starting at 50. But you could build 300,000 or 100,000, and that could mean the difference between struggling in retirement and living with dignity and options. Samuel always said his goal wasn't to die rich, it was to never be a burden and to always have something to give. The sixth secret, delayed gratification, is where most people fail. We live in an instant society, but Samuel lived like he was poor for 20 years, so he could live like he was wealthy for 30. He drove the same car for 18 years. He and Ruth took one vacation during those building years, a road trip to visit family. They didn't eat at restaurants. They didn't buy new furniture. Every extra dollar went into assets that produced income. Jewish wisdom has a concept called histapkut, contentment with little. Samuel wasn't miserable during those years. He found joy in Shabbat dinners with family, in studying, in seeing his properties improve, in watching his net worth grow. Delayed gratification doesn't mean delayed happiness. It means finding happiness in progress rather than in possessions. The seventh secret, building for options, not just money, shaped every decision Samuel made. He didn't buy properties in trendy areas that might crash. He bought in stable, working-class neighborhoods where people always needed housing. He didn't leverage himself to the maximum. He kept reserves. He didn't take unnecessary risks. Why? Because at 50, he couldn't afford to start over again. He needed steady, reliable growth. This is wisdom. Young people can take big risks because they have time to recover from failures. But starting at 50 or beyond, you need calculated, careful, consistent action. Samuel compared it to steering a large ship. You don't make sudden turns. You adjust the rudder slightly and stay the course. Now, let's talk about the obstacles Samuel faced, because this wasn't a smooth journey. At 53, a tenant completely destroyed one of his rental units. Thousands in damages. Samuel had to take a second job washing dishes on weekends for 6 months to pay for repairs. He questioned everything. Was he wrong to pursue this path? Should he sell everything and just accept a simple retirement? Ruth sat him down one Friday night. She reminded him of a Jewish teaching. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? She told him that building wealth wasn't selfish, if the reason was to take care of family and help others. She reminded him why they started. Samuel went back to work the next day with renewed purpose. At 61, Samuel had a health scare, a minor heart attack. The doctors told him to reduce stress. Some people would have used that as an excuse to quit. Samuel used it as motivation to work smarter. He hired his first property manager for 2 of his buildings, which reduced his income slightly, but gave him time to recover and focus on the other properties. He learned to delegate, another form of wisdom. At 67, the real estate market crashed. Property values dropped. Samuel's net worth on paper decreased by 30%. He watched neighbors panic and sell at losses. Samuel did the opposite. He remembered another Jewish principle: buy when there's blood in the streets. He used his reserves to acquire 2 more properties at bargain prices. 5 years later, when the market recovered, those properties had doubled in value. These obstacles didn't break Samuel. They built him. Jewish history is full of stories of exile, persecution, and comeback. This resilience is baked into the culture. Samuel carried that resilience in his DNA, in his teachings, in his faith. He knew that setbacks are setups for comebacks if you don't quit. Let me share some of the specific tactics Samuel used that anyone can implement. He tracked every penny in a notebook, then later in a simple spreadsheet. Every Friday he'd review the week's expenses and income. Jewish tradition teaches cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul. Samuel applied it to his finances. He knew exactly where his money went and could quickly identify waste. He automated his system. Once he learned about automatic transfers, he set up his 5 jars electronically. 10% to charity, 20% to investment, 30% to savings, 40% to spending. This wasn't complicated financial advice. This was simple, consistent discipline. He never carried consumer debt. Jewish law actually prohibits charging interest to fellow community members, which created a culture of avoiding debt in general. Samuel took this seriously. He never financed furniture or vacations or cars at high interest. If he couldn't pay cash, he didn't buy it. The only debt he carried was mortgage debt on income-producing properties, where the rent covered the payment. He surrounded himself with people smarter than him in specific areas. He found a tax accountant who specialized in real estate. He joined a local real estate investor group where he learned from people 20 years younger who understood technology and marketing better than he did. He read books by authors who'd done what he wanted to do. Jewish wisdom emphasizes learning from everyone, and Samuel took that literally. He protected his assets. Once Samuel had significant wealth, he learned about liability protection, insurance, and estate planning. He set up entities to hold his properties. He had umbrella insurance policies. He created a trust so his children and grandchildren would inherit efficiently. Wealth building isn't just about accumulation, it's about protection. Now here's what Samuel wants you to understand at a deeper level. These 7 secrets aren't really about money. They're about character. The discipline to give first builds generosity. The commitment to lifelong learning builds humility and curiosity. The patience for delayed gratification builds self-control. The focus on relationships builds community. The courage to start late builds resilience. The wisdom to live below your means builds contentment. The foresight to build options builds security. When you build character, wealth follows. Not always in millions, but always in meaningful ways. Samuel knows people with more money who are miserable, anxious, isolated. He knows people with less who are joyful, connected, purposeful. The goal isn't to worship money. The goal is to master money, so it serves your values instead of controlling your choices. At 94, Samuel's greatest wealth isn't in his bank account. It's in the grandchildren who visit every week, because he taught them that family matters more than status. It's in the young families in his community who seek his advice because he's generous with his time and wisdom. It's in the scholarships he quietly funds for kids who can't afford Jewish education. It's in the peace he feels knowing Ruth will be cared for if he passes first, and that his legacy will outlive him. He often quotes a passage from Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. Who is rich? One who is satisfied with their portion. But Samuel adds his own interpretation. Being satisfied doesn't mean settling. It means being grateful for what you have while building what you want. It means contentment with the journey, not just the destination. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you're 55 and feel like you've wasted decades. You haven't. You have experience, wisdom, and hopefully another 30 years. Samuel had 44 years from 50 to 94. In the first 22, he built his foundation. In the second 22, he refined and expanded. You might have 25 or 30 years. What could you build with even 15? Maybe you're 65 and think you're too old. Samuel didn't cross 1 million until 70. His biggest growth happened between 70 and 90. Age is not the barrier. Belief is. Energy is manageable. Health is controllable to a degree. But belief, that's entirely your choice. Maybe you're 40 and think this doesn't apply to you. You're right. You have even more time. But the principles are identical. Start now. Give first. Learn constantly. Build relationships. Begin where you are. Delay gratification. Create options. If Samuel could start with $700 at 50 and build millions, what could you build starting at 40 with resources and time he didn't have? The wealth secrets from Jewish wisdom that Samuel applied aren't mystical or exclusive. They're practical, proven, and available to anyone willing to apply them with consistency. Give 10% away, invest 20%, save what you can, live on the rest, never stop learning, never stop growing. Build real relationships based on giving value. Start with what you have. Where you are. Trade temporary pleasure for permanent security. Avoid debt that doesn't produce income. Protect what you build. And above all, remember that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. It's meant to serve your values, support your family, strengthen your community, and leave the world better than you found it. Samuel sits in his apartment, surrounded by children and grandchildren every Shabbat. They light candles together. They share a meal. They tell stories. The kids ask him questions. Last week, his 8-year-old granddaughter asked him, "Grandpa, what's the most important thing you learned about money?" Samuel smiled. He thought for a moment. Then he said something profound. Money is like water. If you dam it up and hoard it, it becomes stagnant and breeds disease. But if you let it flow through you, giving some away, investing some, using some wisely, it stays fresh and brings life wherever it goes. The secret isn't how much water you have. It's how well you let it flow. That's Jewish wisdom. That's Samuel's legacy. That's available to you starting today, no matter where you are, no matter how old you are, no matter how much or how little you have. The question isn't whether it's too late. The question is, are you willing to start? Because Samuel's story proves that the next chapter can be your wealthiest, your wisest, and your most meaningful. Not despite starting late, but sometimes because of it. Because you bring something to wealth building at 50 or 60 or 70 that you couldn't bring at 25. Perspective, patience, purpose, and the understanding that wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve something greater than yourself. Samuel started with $700 at 50 and built $3 million by 94. He didn't do it with luck. He did it with principles thousands of years old and discipline that anyone can develop. The 7 secrets aren't secrets at all. They're choices. And they're yours to make starting right now. Your story doesn't end at 50 or 60 or even 70. For Samuel, 50 was just the beginning. What if it's just the beginning for you too? What if the best chapters are still ahead? What if everything you've experienced has simply been preparation for what you're about to build? That's not optimism. That's not wishful thinking. That's what Samuel proved is possible when ancient wisdom meets modern determination. And if a janitor with $700 could do it starting at 50, what's stopping you? The only real barrier is the belief that it's too late. And Samuel's life is proof that belief is a lie. Start today. Give first. Learn constantly. Build relationships. Begin where you are. Delay gratification. Create options. Apply these 7 secrets with the same faithfulness Samuel did, and watch what happens. Not overnight, not even in a year, but over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Because wealth building after 50 isn't about speed. It's about direction. And direction, combined with time and principles, always reaches the destination. Samuel would tell you that his 94 years have taught him this. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be, to build what you were meant to build, to leave the legacy you were meant to leave. The only question is, will you believe that truth and act on it? Or will you let another year pass, another decade telling yourself the same lies about time running out? Time is running, but it's running toward opportunity, not away from it. Samuel understood that, and now you do too. The 7 wealth secrets from a 94-year-old millionaire who started from zero at 50 are now yours. What you do with them will determine whether you look back with regret or with satisfaction. The choice, as it always has been, is entirely yours.